We are located at the Coney Island Creek. It is an area that consists of two sea inlands at the southwest coast of Coney Island, right next to the entertainment center at Coney Island Avenue. It used to be a merchandise port until it was completely abandoned at around 1960s, when it was no longer of use, and you can see some of the remains of the port right there. Right now it is basically a huge water dumpster. About half of the area right here is trashed because of the streams in the sea that bring all the garbage from around the area into this one creek. The other area that is located to the east is filled with the old shipwrecks that are dated from around 1950s, 1960s, and has the famous Brooklyn Yellow Submarine. The history of the Coney Island Creek begins back in the 17th century when the city right here was just founded. It was not even a part of Brooklyn back then. It was a separate town that was connected to Brooklyn several centuries later. At that moment, the creek didn't go as far eastward as now. It was ending around what is now known as the Cropsey Avenue, and had a connection with the mainland where the creek was narrowing down, forming basically a peninsula. In the late 18th, the beginning of 19th century, the city government decided to widen, straighten, and deepen the canal in order to facilitate the sea travel. What they wanted to do is to dig the creek, enlarging it and forming the Coney Island as an actual island instead of a peninsula. This was actually done, although the canal was still too narrow for the ships to travel around it. It was around that time when the Coney Island used to be an island, when it became the famous amusement center, and then the creek basically adopted its name. Later, around 1929, that connection was closed when the streams and marshes were filled in and the Sheepshead Bay area was closed.
Coney Island, the world's greatest fun frolic, with its beach miles long, all peppered with people, the place where merriment is king. Speed demons of tomorrow getting someplace today. Riding to the top of the park to see the whole show, only to face a vertical drop of 90 feet. Millions of lights frame the resort in a pattern of moving joy.
Right there you can see the remains of what comes to be known as the Brooklyn Yellow Submarine. Its history begins back in 1951 with the Italian line cruise ship Andrea Doria. It weighed about 30,000 tons and had a capacity of about 1,200 passengers and 500 crew. At the time, much like Titanic back in the days, it was considered one of the safest ships in the world. Andrea Doria ran into trouble in 1956. In extremely foggy weather on the North Atlantic off Nantucket, the ship collided with a Swedish liner. Some of the passengers and crew members were killed, but most of them survived. Unlike the Titanic tragedy, other ships were in the vicinity to assist, as well as the SS Stockholm, which did not sink. The Andrea Doria sunk with a large number of valuables on board. For example, a solid silver statue of mermaid, about a $6 million value of scrap metal and industrial diamonds.
In dense fog off Nantucket, the Italian liner Andrea Doria collided with the liner Stockholm on July 25, 1956. The accident claimed a total of 53 lives. An armada of mercy ships rushed to the aid of the Andrea Doria. The Stockholm, though damaged with a 40-foot hole in the bow, rescued more than 500 passengers from the doomed ship. The next day, the Andrea Doria sank into 225 feet of ocean.
A few years later, in 1963, a Brooklyn Naval Yard shipfitter named Jerry Bianco decided he wanted to raise the ship. With no prior submarine fitting experience, he decided to build a submarine of the scrap metal that he collected around the area. He named the submarine Quester 1, and his plan was basically to swim to the ship and fill it with flattened dunnage bags that will probably raise the ship to the ground. The submarine was ready to launch in 1971, but due to an accident, which was the fault of the crane operator, it collapsed and sunk, and there it remains to this day. The Coney Island Creek remained a pretty busy place until around the 60s, when it was a maintenance port. Later on, the port lost its popularity due to the ocean streams that were bringing the garbage from all around the area, including the Verrazano Bridge construction. It was around that time that many of the wrecks in the creek and the New York harbor started to appear. Old vessels were stripped of hardware and scuttled, which was a practice that was outlawed in the 70s. These days, the city has no plans to remove the wrecks from the Coney Island Creek, fearing that doing so might release whatever toxins are buried in the mud around them.